Great to be here, and it really is an honor. So, some of you may not know why I'm here. I head the teens ministry just across our different EveryNation churches across Malaysia. Next year, I'm going to take on also the campus. So, anything next gen, anything 24 years old and below, basically, that's what I'm overseeing after, all right? So, teens all the way to campus. And quite recently, in fact, late last year, talking about teens, I had quite a challenge. It was quite a challenge, and it was quite a scary thing that I was considering to do. And let me give you a little bit of a story. So, our English side teens in Puchong is growing well and all that. But what happened was, there were a couple of teens in our group, maybe 5 or 6 that were Mandarin speaking. And I noticed that when they came in, and when I was preaching there, full of fire, I would see them on their phones. And you need to understand that as a preacher, when you see someone on their phone the whole time you're preaching, that doesn't feel good, all right? Eventually, I found out, you know what they were doing? They weren't taking notes. They weren't on WhatsApp. They were playing Pokemon while I was preaching. Do you know how defeating that is, okay? Oh, you chose Pokemon above me, all right? And so now, initially, first reaction, you can imagine, wow, I'm upset. Maybe we should ban their phones altogether. So the moment they enter the halls, right, they got to drop it into the basket. But then I thought again, they are primarily Mandarin speaking. And perhaps even when I say certain things, they might not even understand what I'm talking about. So that thought triggered me to the possibility of, could we start a Mandarin teens group? Now, you need to understand, though I look Chinese and I am Chinese, my Chinese is really little, okay? And I got scared at the thought. And you know, sometimes you feel like the devil might put a thought into your head. I thought that was one of it, right? No, push that thought away. No way am I going to start a Mandarin group, okay? Because I may cause the teens to sway away from God because they don't understand what I'm saying, even worse, right? But then in that process, I remembered 5 years ago. It wasn't recent, it was quite a while back. And I was interning under your pastors, Pastor Cal and Pastor Catherine. I was just 18, 19 around that time. I was interning under them to learn about acting, to learn about songwriting. And in that process, you know your pastors, they are so good at empowering people, right? They got me to sing and song lead for the worship church then. Alright? Now, they didn't get me because I keep singing Jay Chow songs. No, they got me simply because maybe I look the most Chinese, alright? And they say, you can speak a bit of Chinese. Let's get you in. You know how well I did as a Mandarin speaking or Mandarin singer, alright? I sang, and I remember one of the feedback I got was, that guy, he sing Mandarin song as if he's American. I don't even know whether that's a compliment. No, that's not. But you know, in that process, I will forever remember Pastor Cal, Pastor Catherine, keep encouraging, keep saying, just do it. We believe in you and all that. Now, here's the deal. 5 years later, I'm at this crossroad again. Should we start a Chinese teens group? And I remember that story. I remember the words that he did. I remember their belief and trust in me. You know, we have started the Chinese teens group 1 year and we have grown 4 times. 4 times of the number that we started. Can we give your leaders a hand? You know, I would not be where I am today if not for your pastors believing in me, all right? And I think today we are talking a little bit about youth rising up. And honestly, they have all the right to be here, okay? But I think I come here not just as someone who hates the next gen. I come here as their fruit of believing in the next gen, all right? Now, can I have then the second picture? I think part of EveryNation's DNA is very much showcasing our family, because family is big for us. So Roland already said, I'm all the way from Penang, so this is a picture of my family and also me and my sister's significant other, okay? So that's us, all happy, right? Except my brother, he's the only one like not smiling, but it's supposed to be his birthday, okay? It's just that age, right? Where it's the most celebrative day, but they just don't want to smile for the camera. Now, nonetheless, I come from Penang, and if you have been to Penang, you would surely have seen this. Can I have the next picture? Okay, what's this? A durian seed, alright? If you go to Penang and you don't have a chance to see this, you potentially have a very bad host in Penang, okay? Please maybe talk to me, find me, okay? Surely if you go to Penang, durian is a must-try thing in Penang, okay? Now, I show you this because I took over the teens ministry. I inherited it somewhere around 2020 or right after COVID. And in that process, it was right before COVID. And in the process, it was tough, tricky. I began to seek out mentors. And one of the mentors I came across sort of also showed me this. And he was asking me, Jason, what do you see? And just like all of you, I replied, I see a durian seed, right? And he told me, no. I said, what? He said, well, because you take this durian seed, you plant it into the ground, you water it, and it becomes a durian. And then he asked me again, so Jason, what do you see? I said, okay, I got it now. A durian tree. And he said, no. Wow, I'm like, okay, sure. Then what is it? He said, well, because you take the seed, you plant it into the ground, you water it, it becomes a durian tree, and the durian tree has durian fruits. And he asked me again, what do you see? And this time I said, okay, I've got it. I know what you're getting at. I see another durian fruit. And he said, no. Now, by this time, I tell you, he's my mentor, but I was really considering finding someone else, okay? Now, why? Because I thought I got it right. And he said, here's the deal, Jason. You take this durian seed, you plant it in the ground, you water it, it becomes a durian tree. The durian tree produces durian fruit. The durian fruit has durian seeds. And you take the seed, you plant it into the ground, you water it, it becomes a tree, and the tree has fruits, and the fruits has seeds. You do it over and over again, and you will find yourself having a durian orchard. So he asked me again, so Jason, what do you see? This round, I'm very smart. I keep quiet. And then he said, Jason, here's the deal. When we deal with young people and youths, you could either see them as a durian seed, and if you see so, you know what I do with a durian seed? I eat the meat and I throw the seed away. But he said, if you see it as a durian orchard, a potential durian orchard, can you imagine how will you treat the durian seed differently? And today I'm here to talk very much about youth rising up. But before I even go there, the first thing we need to know is when it comes to youth, we need to ask ourselves this very important question: what do you see? When you look at them, do you just see a durian seed? Do you just see as someone who is young, who is immature, who doesn't know much about the world? Or do you see them as a durian orchard? Because you would imagine you would behave very differently towards them. And honestly, this question is not just a question that my leader thought of and wow, what brilliant forwards, right? No. In fact, when you read through the Bible, you find that God sometimes asks certain people this powerful question. He asked Zerubbabel, he asked Amos, he asked Zechariah, he asked Jeremiah. And I want to just capture a little bit of this text in Jeremiah. And it reads this, and I'll tell you why this question is so important. And the word of the Lord came to me saying, Jeremiah, repeat these 4 words after me in 3, 2, 1. What do you see? And I said, I see an almond branch. Then the Lord said to me, you have seen well, for I am watching over my word to perform it. You know, the context a little bit was this. God was calling Jeremiah, and Jeremiah saw himself as young as a youth. So he was a bit insecure, not too sure whether he can take up this call. And to him, God asked, what do you see? To this young man, God asked him, what do you see? And we see 2 things happen thereafter. Number 1, God says he will perform the words and the thing that Jeremiah sees. And I believe this. What he saw became the thing God fulfilled. And it wasn't just that, because after this verse, you find a Jeremiah who's no longer really the insecure youth anymore. In fact, Jeremiah is known as almost like a hot-blooded prophet who is just willing to unleash God's wrath in word form. So bold, yet so young. You know, what I find is this. When Jeremiah began to change what he saw, it wasn't just God who fulfilled it. It also changed him as a person. And I believe that if we were to see the youth rise, I know that God will do it. I know. The question is not whether God will do it, but whether we see it and whether that changes the way we think about youths in general, teens in general. Because you find that our seeing shapes our thinking. And I found this to be so powerful because, again, when I inherited the youth ministry, the teens ministry at 2020, I appreciated my senior pastor asking me this question also. What do you see? In fact, he asked it in the leadership training. What do you see, right? So everybody just tried to figure out. And at that time, as young as I was, honestly, let me be very honest. I saw youth ministry as youth service. What does that mean? means my thinking would be, I just need to make sure service runs. I just need to make sure there is an usher in place outside. I just need to make sure there's slides during worship, there's a worship band, there's a preacher on stage. I just need to make sure that happens. That's my mode of thinking, because all I saw was youth ministry equals youth service. But when pastor asked me this question, I began thinking, could I see youth ministry, youths in general, in a different way? So what happened was I began to talk around with different youth pastors, and I find it's very true that seeing shapes their thinking. So some youth pastors would say, Jason, I see many new friends coming to church, many invites coming to church. And their thinking was this: if I want to see many invites coming to church, we need to do events. We need to have some of the most amazing, most fun, most well done events. And I tell you, they're some of the best events for teens. And they see flocks of teens coming in for their event. Why? Because they see invites and they think how to make the invites come. The other pastor that I know was really seeing the youths being biblically strong. That's great, right? Theologically strong, theologically sound. And there was once I visited their youth group. They had an apologist, okay? So someone who is really good at defending the faith, speaking to the youth, 12 years old all the way to 7. Now, I'm 25 this year, and I remember tuning in. At 25, I struggle to catch up to what this guy is saying. And I'm looking at the 12-year-olds, I'm thinking, if I'm lost, you are either a genius or you were lost 10 minutes ago, all right? Now, nonetheless, that was how the leader saw. He saw the things being biblically strong. So his thinking was, I need to get the best speakers, best Bible teachers, best apologists into the house. Nothing wrong, that's great. But then I begin to ask myself, so what do we want to see in our teens ministry? At least for today, I'll talk about teens ministry, all right? And I think to a certain extent, how I began to see teens back then shaped very much how our teens ministry grew from then. So, 3 things, as I talked with my senior pastor, we wanted to see in the youths, in the teens generation. The first thing was this. We wanted to see development. Now, I wish I can phrase it better, but let me just put it as blunt, right? We wanted to see development. Now, what does this mean? Which means this: every teen that comes in at 12, 13-year-old, I want them to leave teens change, not just in height, not just in size, not just a bit of a mustache here. No, I want them to change in character. I want them to change in maturity, in confidence. A teen that's insecure coming in should leave as a secure teen going out. A teen that is uncertain how to lead a group is able to lead a group going out. I want to see teens being developed during their teenage years. And you know why is this so important? I remember talking to someone. I said this, Jason, during my time, okay, as a young professional, we were so on fire for God. We were really focusing on how to help one another grow in the faith, and that's great. But I said, Jason, now that church, we died down already. I said, why? Because we were so focused on developing our generation, we lost the generations thereafter. Because nobody thought to develop them. Everybody was just focusing, how can we enjoy, how can we build one another? But they lost the next generation. And this is so important. Now, once we say we want to see development among the teenage youths, then sometimes people start to think, oh, Jason, so the thinking is we start to think trainings, we start to think programs, modules to upgrade them, to upskill them. Now, that's great, and I love trainings and programs. But one thing I realized is this. You see, we did trainings, we did programs, helping youths become leaders. And in that process, one of the teen got in the program and came out as title-wise a leader. But what happened was, during the group, so that time it was Zoom and all that. So after service, we have group discussions. And without fail, almost every group discussion, this leader would give many different excuses why this leader cannot attend the group discussion. So it's group discussion time. Oh, sorry, my mother called me. I got to go soon, all right? Oh, sorry, I got to go eat lunch now. Oh, sorry, I got homework to do and all that. Now, I tell you, it frustrated us at the start because you are the leader. Yet it feels like you are not committed. You are not doing what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to facilitate the group, but why are you not doing so? But this person went through training. This person went through the program, the module, but why is it that nothing changed? Now, as I begin to see that, then it really got me thinking, on top of training, what else can we do to really see genuine development? So who is my reference? I reference how Jesus developed his disciples. Because believe it or not, Jesus was 30 when he started his ministry. Traditionally, they believe that rabbis' followers are younger than the rabbi themselves. So if Jesus is 30, we know that his disciples are younger than 30. And traditionally, during that time in Jewish culture, by 13 onwards, you can actually follow a rabbi. Which means this, okay, believe it or not, you might think the disciples are 40, 50 years old, right? No, they could be anywhere 13 to 30 years old. They are your teenagers, they are your campus students, they are your young professionals. Think about that. So if there's anyone I want to reference to see how he developed the next generation into magnificent world changers, it's Jesus. And one of the verses that I came across, and I love it, was this. So Jesus appointed 12, all right, whom he also named apostles. So if you are familiar with the story, Jesus chose 12 to be his closest followers, so that they might be, and I love this word, with him. You see the way Jesus developed that 12 young men? It wasn't that he appointed them to go into many different training modules. No. He wasn't appointed them, okay, you go to this seminar, that seminar. No. He said, I appoint you 12 so that you 12 are with me 24/7. And then I begin to think, if I and we want to see genuine development in the teens generation, we need to see development, but our thinking is with. So what happened back then was, we began to get teens. I began thinking, how can I have the teen with the leadership team? Okay, a new leader with the leadership team 24/7, or as much as time that I can have, right? Instead of just a weekly service. So that's when I went to our senior pastor and we proposed, could we hire in teen interns? Why teen intern? On surfaces, we are saying they get to do events, they get to run programs and all that. But deep down, the underlying surface is, I just want to spend as much time with the teens. And if I can get them on board, give them a little bit of a pocket money, now I have 5-6 days in a week with them. You know, remember the leader that I shared just now? Once I show the picture later, some of you might know who this person is. This was the person we got on board to intern. The leader who was so not committed in leading and doing whatever a leader should do. And traditionally, you would try to change leader, find a substitute, release this leader, right? Not performing. But what we did was, in spending time and in having that with moment, relationship began to form, and this leader began to open up. I finally asked, actually, why do you always leave the group discussion so early? I said, Jason, actually, here's the thing. Because 3-4 years ago, I was assigned to lead a smaller team. I was just 14, 15 at that time. What happened was, I texted the team in the WhatsApp group. Nobody replied. No one. And so I decided to text each one personally. Finally, they replied. We agreed on a meeting time. And Jason, I showed up at the meeting time, and guess what? Nobody showed up. And at 14 or 15 years old, this person decided and concluded, I don't want to be a leader because I am not a good leader. You see now? A lack of commitment issue. We might think it's a work ethic issue. We might think it's laziness. Had a real heart problem. But that can never be surfaced in a training or in a program or in a seminar. No, that happens when we engage with. And eventually we process with this person. Long story short, within the internship process itself, this person for the first time, can I have the next picture? Led 3 teens to Christ for the very first time of her life within the internship. Now, there's only 2 pictures here, but it's actually 3 teens within that short internship time. From someone who was so afraid to lead and feel incapable to now someone who is bringing young teens to Christ. You know, right now, she's a life group leader, no longer just a core, and one of the most outstanding leaders that we have. Why? Because we saw the teens as a generation to be developed and begin to think not just training program, but how can we pull them alongside with us and grow alongside. Now I say this because today Pastor Catherine and Pastor Kel was saying, how can we talk about seeing the youths rise up? Well, guess what? They can. But we got to see them rising up. We got to see that possibility. But the way to go about it is not just, why not let's just get the best people to train and run a workshop. No. The best way is, how can we bring the teens as close as possible to us and live life together with them, because that's how development happens. Now, in the process, I also began to talk to my senior pastor. And the second thing we wanted to see for the teens generation was this one. I want to see that the teens generation can be dependable. Now, here's a very tricky word, right? Why? Because you got one group of people who are saying, teens, cannot trust them now, okay? Give them to do even the simplest things, right? And those who are parents, you feel it the most, right? Even the simplest of house chores, ask you to sweep the floor, that whole corner forget to sweep, okay? Oh my gosh, problem, right? Ask you to wash dishes, wash just 2 dishes, you break 1 plate, okay? Right? How can the teens be dependable? You got another group where, I want to depend on the teens, but the way you depend is, whatever I don't want to do, I throw to you, alright? I remember recently talking to someone, the dad would get the teens to, the kids, right, to cook and all that. Why? Because the dad hates cooking. So whatever I don't like to do, that is your job, right? Does that mean, right, is that dependable? And when we talk about dependable, I remember talking to a leader, and this leader was coming to me and saying, Jason, why is it that when I try to empower my teens to do things, the end result is they start to complain. The end result is they are very not motivated. The end result is they burn out. But Jason, you get your team to do even more difficult things than what I try to get my team to do. But yet they stay on with you. They continue to do, and in fact, if anything, they become more initiative. Why? And then I was telling this leader, I asked, so in this process, typically how do you go about it? As leader said, okay, if I have a teen that I'm trying to empower, I will lay out the task to them. Okay, please do this, and then I will get them to do it, and I might follow up. I said, that's great, all right? I do that too. But the one extra thing I do with them is I do it with them, rather than I throw it to them. That's a big difference. I tell this leader exactly why. I say, because when I empower a teen, I'm not saying, nah, you do, because I don't want to do, because it's too easy for me, because this is too low class for my status. No, I tell them saying, my load is heavy. Can you share it with me? Do you see the difference? Because now we are not throwing something that we don't want to do to them. We are saying, guys, I need your help to carry this load alongside with me. So how does this look like practically when we want to see youth rise up and become dependable, become a generation that we can empower and trust, real weight and responsibility to? We shared with them. And here's how I actually shared with my team. So quite recently, October in Malaysia is exam season, all right? Or IGCSE and all that. So our worship team went from 2 full bands to like just 1 guy available, okay? And I told the worship head, I said, you know what? If that's the case, just put my name in also. I'm willing to share the load with you guys. And the person actually did put my name. So for 3 weekends, I'm singing, okay? When the tag team, so happened that day, not enough teens showed up, right? And they had not enough people. 1 person is trying to man the whole thing. So happened I wasn't preaching that weekend, and I told the team, said, you know what, let me sit with you at the tech booth. You tell me what to press, I'll press with you. And that was what I did at the tech booth. I said, did I press correctly? Did I press correctly? Ushers, when there were not enough ushers, or even when the ushers were standing out there in the hot sun, I make sure I stand in front of them in the hotter sun. Why? Because I'm saying, whatever we are asking you to do, I'm not throwing it to you, I'm sharing the load with you. And what happened then was this. You know, I now have a team of head of departments who are just 21 years and below. And they help me to oversee not just 1 teen service, not just 2 teen services, not just 3 teen services, a total of 4 teen services every weekend, with next year going to add a few more because they are going to help me to oversee the campus services also. And guess what? All of them are still full-time students. You ask me, is the next generation, are the youth dependable? Yes, they are. Yes. And I believe when they rise up, you will find that they are ready and able to carry heavy weight and responsibility. But first, we got to see them as dependable, and we got to think differently. We share the load with them. We bring them alongside with us. And we don't just see it now. I believe when you read through the Bible, you see that also. Now, the last one was this. And in church, we always talk about discipleship. So the last thing we wanted to see was discipleship. Now, for those of you who don't know what that word means. To put it plain in the most easy, understandable way is this. Discipleship is someone bringing alongside another, maybe someone who don't believe in God or a bit far from God, and say, why not you follow me to learn about God? So as I follow God, you follow me, and in that process, you learn how to get to know God. All right? In its shortest, sweetest statement. And our church talks a lot about discipleship. And one thing I noticed was this. Discipleship was very much taught and trained for people who are 18 and above. Okay? So 18 and above, the adults, right? They will be doing discipleship and discipling people, teaching people about God, and that's great. But then I got a little bit ambitious. I began thinking, can we get 17-year-olds and 16-year-olds? Can we see discipleship there also? What about 15-year-olds? Can we see discipleship happening also? What about 14-year-olds? Can we see 14-year-olds discipling people also? Let me ask you here, plain and honest, do you see a 14-year-old discipling someone else? Can you see that? I wanted to see that. And then it really got me thinking, how come that doesn't happen? Because we put in so much effort thinking how to make service happen, how to make this happen, that happen. But why don't we put in enough effort to design and ensure that even a 14-year-old can disciple someone else? Then here's where, in that process, while we want to see discipleship, we begin to think design. We need to intentionally allow the teens space to disciple even as young as 14-year-old. So what did we do? We redesigned the teens ministry somewhat. We used to do trainings. The trainings, if you are 18 years old and you join, you might be able to understand. But if you try to join as a 16 years old, you might just be lost. So we thought to ourselves, could we redesign our training so that the 16-year-old can join and also learn what it means to disciple? So we redesigned, and then the 16-year-olds joined and they got it. They started discipling people. And then I got a little bit greedy. I said, can we also have the 15-year-olds join? So we redesigned the whole training and the whole process again so that the 15-year-olds can join. And now you see 15-year-olds discipling. And then I got even more greedy. Can I see 14-year-olds joining the training and learning how to disciple people? So we redesigned the training again. We shortened it, we simplified it. And now you find 14-year-olds in our training, 14-year-olds learning how to disciple people as well. Now, the second thing we did is this. Something about youth rising up. Youth rising up sounds very cool, but there is a certain context we all need to understand. It's very hard for a teen to lead someone of the same age because age is a big deal for teens. A 14-year-old is almost miles away from a 13-year-old, right? It's almost like heaven and hell, mountain and sea kind of a thing, right? And a 15-year-old and a 14-year-old is a big deal. Now, once you pass 20-year-old, I realize nobody cares about your age anymore, right? Nobody. But for teenagers, it's very different. So then we realize, if we want a 14-year-old to disciple someone else, traditionally, teens ministry operated like this. All the 13, 14 one group, or the 15, 16 one group, or the 17, 18 one group, or all the 14-year-old one group, or the 15-year-old one group, right? Why? Thinking is they can find friends who are their age. Great, I love that thinking. But then the problem is this: how can a 14-year-old disciple someone else if all he knows are the 14-year-olds? A 14-year-old will struggle to disciple a 14-year-old. He will. So then we restructured the whole grouping. So now you find in our life group, you have a 13-year-old, you have a 14-year-old, 15-year-old, 16-year-old, 17-year-old, all in one life group. Guess what? You know who complained the most? The parents. Because the parents will come and tell me, Jason, my kid tell me they no friend. The 17-year-old will feel the 13-year-old too kiddish, and the 13-year-old will think the 17-year-old too scary. And I tell you, for 6 full months, I keep receiving so many complaints. But I stuck by it because we want to believe that the 14-year-olds can disciple the 13, the 15 can disciple the 14, 16, 15, 17 disciple the 16. Not 2 years, maybe 1 year later, we actually see that happening. And I remember trying to redesign this whole thing so that young people can be discipled. There was this teen, 14-year-old. When we redesigned the training for 14-year-olds, he was one of our first guinea pig. And the thought of him being disciple and now making disciples, you know who laughed at the thought the most? It wasn't the leaders, it was the parent. The parent, my child leader? Hey, Jason, you know my child or not? Have you seen him before? No way. And then, sort of laugh it off. And I said, okay, I get it, uncle. But we try. And the father has valid reasoning because this 14-year-old was really shy. You try to talk to him, he might not even look you in the eye. He's like, don't want to look you in the eye, the shy kind. But could we also get him to disciple someone? So we put him into our training, put him in the right group where there's younger people to disciple. Just this year, together with me, he brought one teen to Christ. And then today, he invited another unchurched teen to church. Just today. And then guess what? Next week is our camp. He invited another unchurched friend to church. All this, the parent was the one who doubted him the most, but we saw him as a disciple maker as young as 14 years old. So we designed it to make it happen, and eventually it did. Now, when we talk about youth rise up, I hope that in rising up, it's not just them growing up, it's just not more teens, but every teen that comes in here eventually, and I know they will, everything that comes in here will be a disciple maker regardless of their age. But how does it happen? We need to intentionally design so that it happens. Now, the conclusion of all these three, as we talk about youth rise up, is this. We saw them as next generation leaders. A 13-year-old comes in, and I already see them as a leader. A 14-year-old comes in, we already see them as a leader. All the three summarize is this. We see them as next-gen leaders. And honestly, I find this is a biblical thought. Seeing the next generation, not just as people to do our work, but to see them as leaders. And in fact, I remember this letter that Paul gave to Timothy. So Timothy was, compared to Paul, a very young man. Some would believe that actually he's maybe around teenage campus years. Some would believe maybe he's a bit older, but regardless, he was young. And then at the same time, though he was young, he led a church that perhaps a congregation much older than him. And it was to this person called Timothy, Paul wrote this: let no one despise you for your youth, but set the believers an example in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, in purity. Now, a lot of people would read this and they would focus on the speech, conduct, love, faith, and purity, and they would say, wow, those are the 5 things, right? All of us should be a good example in. Great. I think that's a good application. But recently when I read this again, I realized, wait a minute. Paul saw Timothy as a leader. That's why he wrote this. Before he talked about in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, in purity, the fact that he told Timothy to set the believers an example, to set for people older than you, your age, younger than you, set an example to them. He's telling Timothy, do you know, I see you as a leader. And if we want to see the youths rise up, we want to see the youths grow here, and I believe it will, then we got to shift how we see them totally. But here's the deal, and here's why it's so important that we start to see them differently first. Because, another version of this text wrote this: don't let anyone look down on you because you are young. Here's the deal. It's not just us trying to see them. If we don't see them, the world sees them in a certain way. The world sees them as you are insecure. That's why you got to put on a facade. You got to put on filters on social media to try to boost your looks. Why? Because you are actually insecure. You are not pretty deep down. They have a certain way they look at them. They have a certain way they look at the youth. Your life is boring, no purpose. Why not you just waste your life away? They have a certain way they are looking at the youth. And it's not just the world that has a certain way that they look at the youth. They have a certain way that they might look at themselves. And I can imagine at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if Timothy, when Paul wrote, don't let anyone look down on you, it wasn't just anyone. I wouldn't be surprised if Timothy, somewhere along the way, also looked down on himself. That's why it's to Timothy, Paul had to remind him, you may see yourself a certain way, the world may see you in a certain way, but here's how I see you. I see you as a leader. And I want to end with these 3 pictures. Now, those who have worked with me for a while and last time like Y-Phone, PC, you would be familiar with these 3 faces. But I want to share with you how they or the world saw them initially. The guy wearing the Hebrews 12:10, his name is Alan. And once upon a time, when we got him to be a young leader, I still remember, he was one of our most complained leaders. Everybody was complaining about him, saying his commitment is low, he's not doing what he's supposed to do as a leader. And I remember this one statement was, Jason,
This guy is leader, but his commitment is lower than a normal teens member. Jason, I think you got to do something, maybe release him or something like that, right? Problem. And I don't blame anyone for seeing him as that, because to a certain extent it was. But at the time while I took the word seen, 2 years back, I decided, you know what, I'm still going to stick by it and see him as a leader. Let me just share where they were once upon a time first. This is Brian, all right? Brian is one closer. Behind that is someone else, okay? So this is Brian. And Brian, once upon a time, saw himself as really incapable to cope with studies and ministry. So full-time student, A-level student back then. And I remember there was once we had a call and he was just crying, bawling his tears out. So he's more of the emotional kind. He said, Jason, I can't do this anymore. I need to step down. I feel that there's nothing else I can do but step down. So he saw himself as the only way to go now moving forward is me stepping down, because I'm crying, I'm breaking down. And while I empathize with him, I said, don't step down just yet perhaps. I feel for you. I'm with you, but part of me deep down still sees you as a leader. So don't step down just yet. Now, the third picture, this one Pastor Catherine, as a wife would know very much. So this is Jessica. And once upon a time, she faced quite a difficult burnout season, almost 6 months or more. And at that time, really, when I processed it with her, a lot of the words were very self-defeating. Jason, I don't think I'm a strategic leader. I don't think I'm a good leader. I'm not bearing fruits. I don't have fruits to show. I don't think I'm cut out for teens. I don't think I can do it. But it wasn't just, oh, maybe she can serve working it out and maybe not teens. No, it was more than just the generation she was serving in. She was really self-defeating. But at that time, though she saw herself as such, deep down in me, I was saying, why not we stick by it first? Because somewhere in me still sees you as a leader. You know, the first guy, Alan, who was not committed, he's still a full-time student. And as our teens grow, some teens stayed in Setia Alam, Kota Kemuning, different places. And there was once, after his class, all the way in Ta UC, he drove to meet his teen in Kota Kemuning, drove to meet his teen in Setia Alam, then drove his teen to meet in Puchong. In one day, he drove 100 km to meet the teens under his care. And he told me, Jason, I spent all my petrol trying to meet them. That I got to tie my belt a bit, eat less so that I got money to pay for my petrol. When I look at him now, the leader that everybody once said not committed, who dare to both say, I drove 100 km to meet someone in a day. Still a full-time student, but so committed. The guy, Brian, who saw himself as the only way to go moving forward is to step down. You know, when I started the Chinese teens and now we are growing, right? So eventually, because it expanded and I need to put attention somewhere else, I was really calling out to my leaders, who is willing to take on the head, right? The pastoral role for the Chinese group teens, because I need someone to stand in. The older leaders did not, just quiet. Some of the younger ones, I don't know whether, but it was Brian who says, Jason, if you are willing to coach me, I'm willing to step up. And now he's the head for our Mandarin teens. And Jessica, who says, I'm incapable, I feel I'm not cut out for this, I'm not a strategic leader, I'm not this, I'm not that. Eventually, through processing and all that, she said yes to stepping up as our Rimbayu teens head. Now owning a teens group on her own, and I'm not even there. And I said, Jess, wow, you have it already, right? You know, when I look at all three of them, 2 years back, if we had just settled with how others look at them, if we had just settled with how they saw themselves, boy, oh boy, they wouldn't be here perhaps. And not just they wouldn't be here, the Mandarin teens would have no leader, the Rimbayu teens would have no leader, the teen that sits in Setia Alam, Kota Kemuning, nobody to drive all the way there to meet them. But 2 years back, thank God, by God's grace, we saw them as a leader. And we stuck by it, we nurtured them, and they eventually rose up. And now you have Alan, Brian, and Jessica. Now I'm saying all this because I believe this won't just be a story for the people, for the youth in Puchong. This can also be the story here. where we can see many youths not just coming in. That's just honestly part one. And it's not hard for the youths to come in. You guys got such an amazing hall. Even I'm not a youth, I want to come in, right? I wouldn't be surprised if there would be flocks of youths coming in. But it's not just about youths coming in, it's about youths rising up. It's about youths showing you that they are changing. God is changing them. It's about you showing them that you can give me responsibility. I can carry weight. It's about youths that say, you know what? I'm 14 years old, but I'm ready to disciple someone. In fact, one of our teens, 14 years old, say, can I learn how to preach? But how? It doesn't start with how capable they are, because sometimes they don't start off that way. It doesn't start off with how charismatic they are, because sometimes they are the quietest of teens. It starts with, what do you see? What do you see? And I know deep down in Pastor Cal and Pastor Catherine's heart, they see the youth rising up. And today I'm here not just to tell you about this, but it's also a rally call beyond just your pastor seeing the youth rise up. Would you see them likewise too? And if all of us can see that, can you just imagine 1 year down the road, 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road? No, I hope the sad story of that person who told me, Jason, all of us, we were so focused on developing, inviting our own friends that now we lost the next 2 generations. I hope that will not be the story here, and I know it won't. They said this could be the story here. So I want to invite all of us. What do you see? What do you see?